Hello friends, and welcome back to another video. Today is our blind date with a book and blind date with a bake, episode 5. So we've done 5 total books and bakes, and it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed doing this, so I hope you guys are enjoying it. And you know that from our last episode, we're in the middle, I feel like right here. Ooh, that looks really tasty. Oh, raspberries. This is a raspberry tart with poppy seed pastry. I want to go with this top one. So let's go ahead and do this one. It's soft cover. I did terrible. Okay, ready? Let's see. Ooh, knitting. I've had this book for so long and I have not read it. We were supposed to be reading, or I was supposed to be reading, Knitted by Anne Bartlett, and baking a beautiful raspberry tart, which I did, and oh my goodness. Well, now it's not so pretty, but it's very pretty, and I'm not gonna lie, it's already halfway gone, and I made it yesterday. So it's delicious, it's wonderful, and it's delightful. So you want to know how it's all put together and how it's set and how we're going to move forward. If you're new here, first, my name's Melissa. You found yourself at Melissa's Cozy Corner, where we talk about books, baking, and other cozy content, and today is books and baking. But we're not going to dive deep into this recipe because it's not my recipe. It's actually a recipe of Melissa Forti's. It's from her Italian baking book, and I just want to test out some new bakings and new recipes, and this has been a great way to do it. And I unwrap a book each month from a collection of books that have been wrapped up to choose what I'm going to be reading next. So that's kind of like the gist of how this works. It's kind of interesting. I hope. And at the end of the month, I go ahead and do a little review about what this book was about, or the book I read was about, and I show you how the bake went. So let's go ahead and do a little baking montage. I'll show you how the bake went, and I'll tell you the little synopsis on the back of the book while we do it. In Anne Bartlett's engaging novel, a chance meeting sparks a friendship between two very different women who share a fascination with knitting. Sandra, a rigid academic, struggles to navigate the world without her husband, whom she has recently lost to cancer. Martha, a self-taught textile artist with her own secret store of grief, spends her days knitting elaborate projects charged with personal meaning. As the two women collaborate on a new project, surprising events will happen to heal them both. There are a few quotes I'm going to go ahead and continue reading because I think this bake is going to take a little bit longer than the back of the synopsis. Words had always been enough in the past. Words, she had frequently said to her students, could do anything, take you anywhere. In the beginning was the word. Words had no limitations. With words, you could tunnel through mountains of theory, construct arrangements like suspension bridges. She could recount her joy as a 6-year-old discovering that the words she spoke were only one language, that there were hundreds of other ways of saying the same thing, often with more nuisance. Language and literacy, she said to her students, were a powerful combination, giving access to all the information in the world. Words were energy, dynamic. They moved around, through, over, under. At this juncture, she would turn and write on the board, over my head, think through things, understated, and invite further contributions from the class. Sandra was a word gobbler. In her childhood, she had read compulsively everything from cereal boxes to her father's law books. All her life, she had stuffed words into herself. Books, articles, conferences, workshops. At times her brain ached with distension. Her whole body was pinched and pinned by words. The backache from being too long at the computer, the pain of hands pounding at the keyboard. She had been making and unmaking words her whole life. Floods of words that threatened to overflow the poor channels she made for them and spill across the flat Australian plains of her life, swirling with mud and debris. There were times she wished she could stop the flood, wished there were another way to say things. But the fact was that words had their limitations. There were some things in life, feelings, experiences, for which there were no names. There were no words for the joy she had shared with Jack, and no words for losing him. No words for this mindlessness, this absence. So this book is about grief, and it is about healing through grief or coping with grief. And I thought it was really intriguing. Before we get too far though, I do want to eat this tart before it gets too warm because it's sunny outside and it's a cold tart. But I do want to tell you first, the first section of this video is going to be non-spoilers, so I'm not going to spoil you at all, so you can go ahead and pick up this book if you want to after you listen to my non-spoiler section and see if it's actually interesting to you. Or if you've read this book or don't mind hearing spoilers, you can listen to the second half of the video where I'll go ahead and dive deep into the spoilers, talk about the characters, talk about what's happening, and then at the very, very end, I'll I'll open a new book that I just thrown on the ground. I'll open a new book and I'll choose a new bake as well. So if you want to skip the spoiler section, go ahead and jump down below and you'll see the timestamp for the new book and new bake section. But before we get too far into knitted, I want to eat this tart and tell you how delicious it is. Delicious it is. Words are not working for me today. So this has fresh raspberries on top. The cream in the middle is actually mascarpone and double whipping cream. So this is like really fatty, heavy whipping cream. And the bottom is actually like a poppy seed tart shell, which was really fascinating. I have pollen fuzz in my tart. This is what I get for sitting outside. And the bottom is a poppy seed tart shell, which I've never made before, but all of this was really interesting. One of the reasons I love baking from Melissa Fortes is I learn new techniques, and that's the purpose of baking from her book, is I wanted to test out new recipes, but I wasn't expecting to learn so many new techniques. The mascarpone and the heavy whipping cream, like, mixed together, I was so surprised that it turned out so fluffy and thick, but it's so tasty. In a day like today where it's really hot outside, this cold tart is honestly so nice. There's a bee behind me. And with the fresh raspberries on top, you could also do strawberries. I think strawberries would also go delightfully with it, but it's just really refreshing, really light and fluffy, which is kind of weird to say since it's mascarpone and heavy whipping cream, but it's very smooth and soft, a lot like mousse. And honestly, I could eat this all day. It's so good, and with the fresh raspberries, I love raspberries. But we also need to talk about this book. So I'm going to put this heart away, and we're going to jump into this. But I'm going to go put this in the fridge. Actually, I'm just going to eat the rest of this. I'll be back after I eat the rest of this. All right, we're back. So we have finished the tart, which, again, delicious. Highly recommend Melissa Fortes' cooking book. I was going to put up a picture, but I literally have it sitting right here. So I'm just going to... I definitely recommend Melissa Fortes' baking book. The recipes are actually always really easy and easy to follow, and all of the recipes I've made so far have been delicious and no problems. Meaning, like, you know how sometimes you read a recipe online and it looks delicious, but it never comes out the way it looks online, or it doesn't taste right and you're not sure why. These have been tested and they are been great. I'm still baking through the cookbook, so it's not like they're done, but really good. So highly recommend this cookbook and the tart that I just made. Woo! But now let's talk about Knitted by Anne Bartlett. So this first section, like I mentioned, is going to be spoiler free. Knitted, I don't remember when I picked this up, but I picked it up when I was living in the US, so I've had it for more than 6 years, and it's just been sitting on my bookshelf. It moved all the way to Germany with me, and I found it interesting, especially with the concept of grief. I think grief is always a really hard subject to talk about, especially when it comes to losing a partner or a best friend, and I think it can be written in a way that it's very open, but doesn't actually dive deep into the feelings and the topics, or it can be written to the point where it's almost too depressing and you don't want to read it. And I think this book did a really good job at, like, kind of diving deep into those feelings that we fear we may have, or that some of us unfortunately have felt, of losing a partner or even a family member. When I lost my dad, I couldn't figure out how to talk about my grief, and reading this one, it's not like losing, I think, a life partner, but it's still losing somebody. So grief can just always be a really hard topic. I think this book did a really good job of talking about the subject. It's just, I think there were times where I didn't like the characters all that much, which was really interesting. It was mostly Sandra, and I mean, she's described as a rigid academic type that struggles to navigate a world without her husband. And I found her quite frustrating at times, and impersonable and self-focused. And I couldn't figure out if that was the grief she was feeling or if that was her personality. So so you know what this book is even about, other than grief. We follow these two women, Sandra and Martha, and Sandra and Martha meet in a very interesting way, and they end up kind of interacting about their knitting, because Martha is a big knitter. Like, if you walk into her house, it would be almost like her house is knitted. She's such a big knitter. And Sandra is very organized and very, like, think about Martha as the grandmother who also has the knickknacks and everything everywhere, and you walk in and you feel like a cozy blanket being wrapped around you. Like, it's not messy, it's just like full of homely things. And then you walk into Sandra's house and it feels like an IKEA like setup apartment. So we have two very different women, and they're both going through different things. And you get Martha, who's almost like a people pleaser, who's constantly trying to make sure everybody around her is happy and feels good, and she's so worried about the people around her. And then you have Sandra, who's really focused on her own wants and her own needs. So you have these two women who are very different, just like not in personality, but also just in livelihood and everything else. And their interactions are very intriguing, and they're people that you wouldn't imagine ever being friends. And sometimes I wondered, could they actually be friends? But the thing is opposites do attract. This is actually a thing. Like, my best friend from the US, me and her are nothing alike, but we get along really well because we still understand each other and we still want the best for each other. It's about the love you have for somebody else. It's completely normal to be best friends with somebody who's completely different from you. And so I'm not necessarily against how friendly and how connected these two women are. I found the story slow, but I was still motivated to continue reading it. I didn't find the characters unbearable, but I did find them sometimes frustrating. I felt the story was quite light. I wouldn't consider this book a book I would read again because the story was very kind of like surface level, not in the sense that it didn't go deep into the feelings, but the actual story behind it that pulls the story forward, I didn't really feel like there was much there. This book is not anything about the storyline, it's about the grief and the feeling from these characters. So it's a bit very surface level topic about knitting, which I do have to admit, if you've never knitted, this book is going to be maybe kind of confusing. You knitted or crocheting, anything with yarn. Like, if I had not crocheted in the past, this would have been so confusing to me. I mean, we're talking about different knitting needles, and then we're talking about double ply yarn, which, to be honest, I'm not deep enough in the knitting or crocheting world to know much about this, but I can kind of like figure it out. And then they were talking about things in like different crochets and everything like that. And so if you haven't knitted or crocheted, this book might not be for you. But I mean, if you like books that talk about feelings, a little bit more of a healing novel, a little bit more deeper in emotion than story, then I think this is actually a really good story. I think it held some really good and heartfelt ideas. I read a quote earlier, and it's about words, and I think that was the other intriguing thing. So Sandra is an academic person, so she doesn't actually know how to knit or crochet, but she finds the world of fabrics and materials super intriguing. So she's putting on an exhibit for materials and the story behind knitted wear. And she focuses a lot about writing and how words can create feeling and emotion, and how words can be powerful. And I mean, words can be powerful. That's why we as readers love stories so much, is because words can convey feelings and emotions and stories, and they can make pictures, and they can do so much for us. And so I found that part really, really beautiful, especially that quote that I read to you, because it was so impactful and it has so much meaning behind it. Saying that words are so powerful, but then also saying that sometimes you can not communicate what you want to say is so true. And there's been multiple times where, especially if I'm speaking German, I feel like a 2-year-old about to have a fit because I can't express myself clearly and I can't explain why I'm feeling a certain way in German. And even when I'm speaking in English, there's times where I'm trying to come up with a word, and I'm sure you've done this too, where you know there's a word for something and you can't find the word, and it's so frustrating. Or you have this feeling deep inside you and you don't know how to talk about it. Especially when it comes to mental illnesses, sometimes words can never convey the actual feelings behind it. For example, I have anxiety, and sometimes I don't know how to explain to my partner what my anxiety is doing to me or how I'm feeling. And I know I've heard this about people who suffer from depression or suffer from other mental illnesses or even pains where you're saying, hey, I have a pain in my leg and it feels like pins and needles. There's no real pins and needles in your leg, but it's an idea and it's a way to convey the feelings. So the way Sandra talked about words and how powerful they were, it was truly magnificent. I loved that part of the story. I loved the visuals of the crocheting designs, even though I couldn't picture them completely. I just felt like I wish the story was a little bit deeper, because the emotions were extremely deep and the emotions were really captivating. I just wish the story was a little bit more there. Honestly, there's not much more to say about this story in this book. I think if you like knitting, you like stories about healing and grief. That sounds weird. If you like stories about grief and healing from grief, or learning from grief, or if you like stories about, these are the fuzzies. You might see little fuzzies in the air that blow around. We have a big tree that has a big pollen, like it goes and it's like cotton and it flies everywhere, so it's flying everywhere right now. So I apologize if you see little fuzzies flying everywhere. It's not snow. Anyway, there's not much more to say about this book, but if you like books about feelings, books about coming to terms with grief and about growth, I think this could be for you. But just have maybe some knitting or crocheting background. So it doesn't leave it very open for a large audience, but sometimes I love a book that does that because it's not trying to be read by everybody, but it's trying to meet a specific niche. So I found it delightful. I think maybe you could read it without knowing much about knitting or crocheting, but it might just be a little confusing in certain terms. And I hate reading a book where I don't know anything about it. So I recommend it, because I do think the talk about coming to terms with grief was really well done. So that's the non-spoiler section. As I mentioned, if you're not wanting to listen to the spoiler section, go ahead and jump down to the bottom and jump to the next chapter where I'm going to be opening the next book and opening the next bake, so you know what we're going to be doing in the month of June, my birthday month. I hope it's going to be delicious cake and a really good book. We'll see. But if you are wanting to listen to spoilers, then I'm going to be talking about spoilers in 3, 2, 1, spoiler time. So, Sandra is irritable and frustrating, and I found Sandra, like I was talking about in my non-spoiler section, Sandra and Martha meet in a weird way. They end up meeting because a man ends up fainting in the middle of the street, and Martha is there helping them out. And Sandra is walking by and she decides to stop and help out, even though there's multiple people walking by, but they don't stop and they don't help out because that's just the society we live in. At least that's what Sandra and Martha are thinking. I say stop and help. That's my thing. If I take a second to think about it, then I should be doing it. Anyway, so we have Sandra and Martha stopping to help a man who's fainted in the middle of the street. And Martha ends up riding to the ambulance, or in the ambulance with the man to the hospital, and his name is Cliff. I have an issue with the character Cliff, not because of who he is, but because I didn't really find a purpose of Cliff other than filling some of the holes in the story. some something, and Cliff is there to help. Martha needs a reason to crochet, and Cliff is there to take her crocheted item. Martha is stressing out, and Cliff is there to listen. Cliff is just used as a character to fill in an empty spot where we need another character. And I wish that character had more. Like, either take him out or give him more, and don't just make him a homeless person who's happy living home in a homeless world. Like, I needed more from him, and I didn't get more from him, especially with a book about grief. I was wondering, okay, is he dealing with grief? Is that why he's living on the street? I needed more of that character, and I didn't get enough. So that's one problem I had. Martha is a people pleaser. So Martha rides to the hospital with Cliff, and then Cliff kind of becomes attached with her. Not a problem. Martha then also connects to Sandra and brings Sandra a crocheted cardigan saying, hey, thanks for stopping and thanks for being there for Cliff. Sandra is thinking, oh, I don't really know this person. Why is she being weird? Why is she in my home? And Sandra becomes so self-focused that it makes me not like her at all. I feel so bad for her losing her husband, but the fact that she's so self-focused and so focused on her needs and her wants and her exhibit that she doesn't think about anybody else. And everybody when Martha and Sandra get together to be able to do this exhibit, so the idea, I'm all over the place. Sandra wants to put on an exhibit of crocheted items of crochet or knitted items for 100 years. So it shows how knitting has been in our world for many, 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 many years, and how it's still something that women and men also knit and crochet, still do, and still give as gifts and things, and it's this beautiful thing. And so we have Sandra wanting to put this exhibit on because she has realized that this is a really cool thing and she wants to share it. I would go to the exhibit. I would think it's an awesome thing. She ends up asking Martha to do this exhibit with her by crocheting a bunch of items. And cool, but she only asks her because she knows Martha will crochet these items. And then she becomes so self-focused on making sure her exhibit goes out that she tells Martha, hey, crochet these 50 items for me. It's probably only 20 or 30. There wasn't a specific count. And then she's like, you can get it done in 8 weeks, right? Or 11 weeks, whatever. But Sandra doesn't crochet or knit, so she doesn't actually know how long anything takes. And Martha is a people pleaser, so she's going to say yes no matter what. And it's just, I think Martha I understand because I'm a lot like Martha in certain ways, but Sandra, I feel like people aren't that dull. No. I feel like people aren't that hard-headed. If you see somebody stressing out and they're like, yeah, it's okay, I can do it, and they look nervous, wouldn't you be like, oh, are you sure? We can go ahead and extend it. Or, hey, let's go ahead and change some items. Or, hey, let's go ahead and figure out, you probably know some knitters, or you probably know somebody, or you know something you want to, do we need to take some work off your plate? Come on, you can't be that hard-headed to not know that somebody is stressing about knitting 20 items in 11 weeks. This is Martha's full-time job, other than she cleans the church. And I couldn't imagine trying to knit that much. I couldn't imagine trying to put that many videos together in 11 weeks. That feels exhausting. And so to expect somebody to do this, yeah, you're going through grief, you've lost your husband, but don't expect somebody else to just fix your problems for you. And that's what made me really upset, is I feel terrible that she lost her husband. She's going through this grief, but she's expecting so much from so many other people. She uses Kate, her other friend, as a sounding board. But when Kate's trying to give her advice back, she pretty much ignores it. When Kate says, hey, Sandra, maybe you should talk to Martha. She seems to be stressing herself out. Sandra's like, oh, Martha will tell me. When has she ever told you anything? And that's what made me really upset. I'm not getting it. I'm getting frustrated because I know how Martha feels. And I get it. As somebody who's also would understand Sandra, where you're trying to get something done in a decent amount of time, and And also, Sandra's not even willing to learn how to crochet or knit. At one point, she's like trying to crochet a scarf and it's taking her forever. And Martha is thinking, yeah, it's taking you forever. And it's like, yeah, Sandra, it's taking you forever. And now you have to think about, even though Martha is a trained knitter and like loves it, you're making her do this for a job that she never really agreed to. And it's just so sad. So, good thing is that Sandra learns her lesson. But not until Martha ends up being in the hospital. Martha ends up being in the hospital because she has a breakdown, and we learn that Martha lost her partner too. So it's not like Sandra's going through her own feelings and Martha doesn't understand it. Martha lost her partner Martha lost her partner at a really young age. And she had a breakdown and she struggled getting out of it, and she used knitting as a healing process. And she became a perfectionist, and she was so worried about making sure everything was exactly right because her husband died because things weren't exactly right. A drunk driver was driving and ended up killing him. For Martha, everything seemed wrong, and she couldn't seem to get things to work out correctly. And I really loved how Anne Bartlett wrote Martha. I think I was able to connect with Martha way more of that feeling of needing something to deal with pain and grief and stress. And I think the way Anne Bartlett wrote Martha made more sense to me. And I understand you can't have two characters that are exactly the same, but Martha felt more real and I could connect to her. And so Martha ends up being in the hospital because she pretty much makes herself sick because of how much she's working to try to make Sandra happy. And she ends up in the hospital, and Sandra takes her to the hospital. And I'm like, great. But then Sandra's like, I can't handle this. You'll probably be fine. I'll leave you here. When Martha's like 100 and some odd fever, or a crazy high fever, she's chills, it's literally hot outside, and she has a jacket on and she's sweating, but the doctors are saying, no, don't put a jacket on her because her body's literally trying to burn out whatever's happening and you're going to make her sick or worse. And like, Sandra just decides, oh, you're fine, you're at the hospital, I'll leave. And I get it. I hate going to the hospitals too. I hate doing those things. But when somebody needs you, you take the moment and say, hey, this is really hard, but I'm going to go ahead and do this for my friend. And Sandra wasn't doing that for her friend. The next day she goes to the hospital and Martha's completely out of it. Like, she's literally talking about patterns and knitting, and she's almost like in a trance. It's really messed up. And instead of doing anything, she just leaves again. And yeah, she talks to the brother, but I just felt like she didn't care. She was only thinking about what was important for her. She even says, oh, are we gonna get the knitting projects done? Sandra, come on. So Martha thankfully ends up getting better, but this is where I lost a little bit of faith in this book. And at one point, Martha's in the hospital, and then Martha's having a really high fever, and something, maybe God, I don't know, kisses her, and her fever breaks, and then when she wakes up the next day, all the crocheted items are done being crocheted. And I thought back to a moment that was a little earlier in the book, when Martha was sitting in the waiting room. Sandra goes and parks the car, and she's trying to make it back to the waiting room really fast, so she tries to make a shortcut, and she runs into a janitor, and the janitor ends up showing her the way. And when Sandra turns around to say thank you, the janitor's gone. The same janitor walks into Martha's room, and Martha and him talk for a moment, and he says, oh, I'll see you tomorrow. And then that night she ends up having like a kiss, and her fever breaks, and she wakes up the next morning, and all of the pieces have been crocheted and they're done. And I'm thinking, what? Who is this person and why are they there? This is another Cliff person. It feels like they were just put in there to make the story just fit. And I get it. We need those characters sometimes, but this just was not, no. So that was probably where the book lost me the most, and I was just like a little disappointed. Martha also carries around these bags full of all of her mistakes, and she's always saying that she's going to undo them. We get to know Martha as the person who's carrying around these 3 ginormous bags. And when she wakes up and her fever's broke, the bags are gone, and all the pieces that are inside the bags have been dealt with. And it's beautiful in a way, but I felt like it was an easy fix, and I hate easy fix books. I hate easy fix books. Books that stick in something to make the problem go away. And I felt like that's what happened. Martha ends up being honest and saying, and Martha ends up getting like completely better. Like, she no longer has her stresses. She no longer has the perfectionist problem. She's completely okay with things not being perfect. And she's now honest with Sandra and says, hey, I can't get it done by March. We're going to have to push it all the way to August. And Sandra's like, oh, that's a bummer, but I figured. And then we jump to August, and they do the whole show, and they do the thing, and it's all positive, and then we end. What happened to Cliff? What's up with the janitor? How did Martha get like all better and not care about perfectionism anymore? And Sandra still, what about me? All about me. But yeah, she's getting over her grief. Not getting over. You'll never get over grief. I hate hearing that, and I hate that I just said it. You never get over grief, but she's learning to live with her grief. And maybe that's what happened to Martha. She's learned to live with her grief. But I don't know. So the ending was like, eh. And I have a lot of notes in here. All these little pink tabs right here, these are Sandra being terrible and being self-focused. That's what the pink tabs are. But it was just fine. It's okay book. I wouldn't keep it. Oh, this is I want to read the flame part. This is where I was just like, wait, what? And then she saw the cleaner at the foot of the bed. His appearance had altered, but she knew who he was, all right. Through her feverish eyes, he was as hot and burning as he was. But it was different from him. He wasn't burning up. He was just burning. White hot, a steady flame that she wouldn't normally look at because it was light to burn her eyes out. But they were burning anyhow. So what the heck? She might as well get it over with. As he comes closer, she could smell his fire. It was hot and sweet and roses somehow. Ashes of roses. He was even hotter than she was. His heat was crackling her up inside and out, burning her senses, her common senses, her sensibility. 2 big black cinders. This was it then. This was the end. With a huge sigh of relief, she gave herself up to whatever was coming next. He leaned over her. She felt an incandescence crackle into her hair, face, body, her dry hands fluttering on the sheet like autumn leaves. Breathe it in, breathe it in, breathe it in, fire to consume everything. With his kiss, the whole room exploded into flames. And the next morning she wakes up. Yeah. So, not necessarily my book. I thought it was good in certain ways, but I do feel like there were certain things missing. I felt like the story had things in it to kind of fix the problems quickly, which I sometimes hate and sometimes feel disappointed in. It was okay. It's not a bad book. I think I would probably give it a 3. It was intriguing. I liked the idea of how we work through words and we use words. I loved the idea of how Martha used knitting to kind of get through life. But I didn't like Sandra. I didn't like the quick, easy win at the end, if you would call it that. And I didn't understand the point of Cliff. So, yeah, Knitting by Anne Bartlett. This book's not going to go back on my shelf. I probably won't read it again. And I don't think I would say I wouldn't recommend it, but it's not a book that I think I'm going to think often and then just say, hey, you should read knitting. I think it would be perfect for you. But I'm not saying I'm not recommending it. It's just not a book that's going to come quickly to my head. Anyway, that's Knitting. Very interesting. The story is very kind of, like I said in my non-spoilers section, it's kind of flat. It's all about the emotions and the character building and character coming to a conclusion. So let's go ahead and move on to the fun part. which is opening a book, and I have 7 books left, but I think I'm going to open the baking book first because I love opening the baking book and seeing what I have to bake next. The sun is a little bright, so I'm really sorry, but let's go ahead and see what we're baking this month. Maybe right here? No, I think right here. Ooh. I opened it so quickly and then turned it toward me because I thought it was a cake I already baked. So this is a honey and prosecco liquor cake. Prosecco. I don't think it's prosecco. Prosecco? I don't know. Ugh. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but it looks really, really delightful, and I think a perfect birthday cake. What do you think? I think it's a perfect birthday cake. What Melissa Fortes wrote in the little side, there's a place not far from where I live that belongs to dear friends and amazing winemakers. It is called Caluna, an internationally acclaimed winery where they also produce all sorts of amazing food, such as olive oil, jams, artisan cookies, and much more besides. I'm a big fan of their Prosecco, a sweet liquor made of peach tree leaves. I'm sold. It has such a delicate aroma, perfect as an after-dinner digestive or as an aperitif. Summer at Caluna means wine tasting, a lot of wine tasting, picnics on the grass, eating local organic products, and chatting with friends. Quintessential Italian lifestyle. So this cake is for the D&D. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for being such nice people. I think this sounds absolutely perfect for a summer cake and a birthday cake. I love honey. I love my bees. I got my bees. And I love peaches, especially in summer. I love the freshness, and I think this sounds really delightful. I just need to figure out if I can find the liquor. That's going to be the most difficult part. But I think this is going to be an absolutely perfect bake for this next month, the month of June. Now let's go ahead and see what book we'll be reading. So let's go ahead and, I think I'm reading this book. It's a bit of a fatter book. Do I want to read a fat book this month? Let's read a fat book this month. So we're going to be reading this one. I feel terrible at unwrapping things. Ooh, okay. This is going to be intriguing. The Dead Take the A Train. This is a horror book, so this is going to be a really interesting month. Julie Cruz is a cocked-up, burnt-out 30-something who packs a lot of magic in her small body. My paper's blowing away. She's been trying to establish herself in the New York City magic scene, and she'll work the most gruesome gigs to claw her way to the top. I'm not going to read any more, but we have a honey peach cake with liquor and a horror book for this month. I think this is going to be a very, very interesting month, and if you're not there for next month, for June, you're missing out, because this is going to be really cool and really fun and really crazy. So, yeah, I hope you're excited. This is actually really cool because this is from a book club I joined called the Abominable Book Club, and they do different, each month they do a book sending out, a book box, with different horror books, and they actually kind of do a lot of really great things for different authors, and this is a book that's actually from one of the authors, so it has the signed stickers in the inside, which is really cool. And this is one of the books that were in that box, and I've read a couple of them and they were really intriguing, so I'm quite intrigued on this one. So we have a horror book, and we have, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find the cake. This is actually, I thought this was going to be the cake, which this was our first bake. Oop, found it. Okay. So we're going to be baking this cake and reading this book. So it'll be a very, very, very good month. Anyway, I'm going to let you guys go, and thank you so much for joining me with knitting and the Tart. I'm going to put a little photo here because it's easier because I already ate my tart. And thank you so much for joining me for this month, you guys. If you guys like this video, make sure you give it a like. It's really helpful. If you guys also aren't subscribed and want to follow along on this fun little journey I'm journeying through, go ahead and subscribe. And I will see you guys next month. Actually, I'll see you in a couple weeks where we're going to have another fun video where we're going to be talking about more books, more baking, and more cozy content. Until then, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you guys soon. Ciao!